All right, hello and welcome to the next edition of the BobCAD-CAM webinar series. Today's topic is Design Wireframe to Solid. This is day one of a 3-day series. It will be this Wednesday, the following Wednesday, and the Wednesday after, where we're covering key topics and questions that I get often, but also just a chance to show you guys what we can do here with the Bobcat system. Now, all right, the goal of today's webinar to cover common drawing features you'll use every day, right? And as you know, my name is Al DiPaolo. I'm the voice of the Bobcat After Dark video series. I've done a couple hundred videos on Bobcat at this point. If you guys are on Instagram, at BobCAD-CAM, hashtag Bobcat, hashtag BobCAM, hashtag made with Bobcat, all of those hashtags work. So what are we going to learn today? Well, today we're going to just look at creating rectangles, using offsets. We're going to go through arcs, hole locations, and trimming functions. Okay, so we're going to talk about some common wireframe geometry and just different ways to use it. And then we'll also get into how to take that wireframe and develop solids out of it, and also how you can modify and make changes to your design with the CAD History Tree. Now, as always with Bobcat, you can expect fewer steps, better cuts, and more profit, okay? And if you guys have questions at any time after this presentation about the software configuration, pricing, promos, training, whatever it may be, just call 877-333-4903. All right, now, let's get into it. So I wanted to start out with, well, a couple of things. To begin with, if you guys, how you communicate with me, right? So this is a live presentation, and in the GoToMeeting control panel, there's an area where you can type questions. Now, I am the only presenter in today's webinar, so I'll answer the questions to the best of my ability, or if I can answer them while I go. If you ask a question and I don't answer it during the live presentation, don't worry. I look at all the questions and I'll email you what the answer is after the fact, or we may be able to cover it at the end of the webinar, okay? So just keep that in mind. The first question I have for everybody is just a shout out, who you are, where you're from, if you're a current customer, what version of Bobcat you're running. If you're not a current customer, maybe what CAD-CAM software you may be running, and any brands of machines that you may have, whether you're a Haas user, a Herco user, a Miltronics user, okay? So we got John here. Looks like I can't tell if he's asking a question or not, but there is a question for John. John's got V32. That sounds great. John, where are you from? Let's see here. Okay, so we got John. Okay, here we go. David, Minnesota, V32. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got Felix. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. All right, let me adjust my screen here a little bit. So we got Felix, V32 4 standard. We got Union, West Virginia. Union. Okay, Scott, South Carolina. Ron Jeffries, he's V32 running Centroid controls. We got Mike, he's running version 32 wire. Who else do we got here? A couple other people that are in here. If you guys take a moment and just let me know who you are, where you're from, and what you're running, whether it's Bobcat or other software, what machines you got, that would be great. All right, let's see. Where are we going to be? Okay, so now that that's done, we can kind of move on to kind of what we want to talk about here. All right, we got Tom, Terry, John, Dan. Thank you so much for everybody joining with me here today for today's webinar. Okay, so this is the part that we're looking to draw here. This is a solid model. It's pretty simple geometry. I kind of wanted to take this moment to talk a little bit about the Bobcat interface. This is the version 32. We got Slade in Louisiana. All right. Okay, very good. So this is the version 32. We have a model up here. I just wanted to go over some of the basic viewing stuff, okay? So we use a mouse with a mouse wheel. If you use the mouse wheel, that will zoom you in or out. Wherever your mouse is pointing, that's where it will zoom in and out to. Okay. If you press and hold the center mouse wheel, that will give you a rotate. So this way you can rotate and view around on different sides of your part. If you have a 3D connection mouse, which is like a joystick, you're able to use that in order to navigate as well. Okay, so these are all your standard viewing options. If you hold control and you left window, that will window zoom. If you hold control and you press the center mouse wheel, that will give you a pan. These viewing gestures are similar to what you might have in SolidWorks. Okay, all right, so that's a little bit about the viewing. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about has to do with the layout of the screens and where things are located. If you go to the File menu, okay, and we come down to User Profile, these are the different preloaded profiles. And what they do is they modify or save where the docking panes are. So the CAM tree, the measure entity, the layers window. And there's a bunch that come installed, pre-installed that are classic, but then there are also you also have the ability to customize your own and save it. So this way, how you like your screen layout, you can load it every time if you're dealing with different users. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the theme. Color, what colors you like, darker, cooler, warmer. You can choose your theme here as well and pick one that makes sense for you. All right, so that's a little bit about the user profiles. And again, that is going to control how these different docking panes, where they're located. You can click and drag these and move them around and dock them in different locations. You also have the ability to right click over any window here, and you can, this blue bar up here, you can right click here and you can turn different docking panes on or off. So that's a little bit about the user interface. Now, the other thing I want to talk about real quick is the settings. Okay, if you guys want to customize hotkeys, you're going to find customized shortcuts here. This way you can assign hotkeys for the different functions in the software. If you want to customize the ribbon bar, and the ribbon bar is all these different tabs and icons up here. If you want to customize those, you go under settings and you can customize the ribbon bar. Now, I will throw this out there. I don't recommend modifying the standard ribbon bars. I recommend creating a new tab and adding your own functionality in there, okay? All of the ribbon bars are laid out here. Within each one, it has the different functions. I recommend you keep the standard layout as is, and then you can create a new tab and add different icons and options you may want, all right? So you can customize your ribbon bar here. You can customize your shortcuts here. Under general, this is going to be a lot of the different directories, whether you want backups turned on. This is how you can invert the cursor wheel, you know, tab equals enter, invert scroll wheel, you know, 3D mouse on. So a couple of different options there. The other thing I want to get into real quick is just document defaults and current documents. The document defaults will be the defaults for future files you create. And current documents, this will be the settings for the current file that you're on. The things that you can adjust here, you know, I typically turn these off. I'm going to turn them on for today. Show axis, show Nomen. I'll turn those on and off as necessary. These are for your different background colors, selection colors, and things like that. If you guys are migrating from an older version into the current version, you know, there is a new function that they added to the settings dialog. So what you can do is open up one of your older files, and then you can come to the current document. You can go to your document defaults here, and you can open up that file with the colors and selection and everything. You can say apply to document or apply to current document and be able to absorb those settings. So that's a really neat feature that they had in there. The other thing that I want to talk about real quick is just the units. So if you're in different units, you can adjust that here. And the other thing has to do with the CAM tolerances. This is where you can set all the default CAM tolerances. Generally, you don't need to adjust them, but this is where they're set. And this is also where you can set the default machining order as well, whether it's feature dominant, tool dominant, etc. Okay, so just a little bit about the interface there. Again, just trying to bring everybody up to speed here. Oh, looks like my pen's a little messed up. All right, now the next thing that I wanted to talk about is how you get into the different drawing functions, right? Or any functions within the software. All right, so we use these tabs up here. This is the ribbon bar. You can tab to different areas, or you can also use your mouse wheel and scroll between these different tabs once you're in here. Okay, so this is using the mouse wheel. The other thing you'll notice is if you hover over any of the functions, a little tooltip will come up. So that way you can see what that function may be used for. Okay, so if you want to use one of these functions, if there's an arrow below it, that will let you choose a specific function. Okay, if you click the one on the top, that will put you in that particular function, but then you'll also have the ability to change what mode that, like in this case, the rectangle, what type of rectangle you're drawing with. Okay, so you can use the ribbon bar to get into the function. You can set up hotkeys, which I talked about just recently. The other thing that you have here too, in the past, you had a lot of drawing functions from the right mouse menu. You'll see those are not there. The right mouse functions are going to give you modify attributes, colors, layers, line styles, and things like that. Okay, you will see some of your view options here, and you'll also see this refresh. We did add a refresh to the version 32, I think 31 as well. So if you get any rendering issues or something like that, like a green arrow out of nowhere, just right click and choose refresh, and that will refresh the screen and remove any of those problems. Okay, I'm going to come back over here to this drawing number 1, and I'm going to just draw a rectangle. So I'm going to say I'm drawing a rectangle. I'm going to draw one. I'm going to hit my space bar, and you can see I can draw another one, and I'm going to hit my space bar. The reason why I'm bringing this up is the drawing functions in Bobcat are modal, which means once you're in a function, it will stay in that function until you either pick a different one or you cancel out of it. How can you cancel out of it? You can hit escape to cancel out of it. You can right-click cancel to get out of it. And I think a lot of times this X will work too, right? So I can click this X, and that will get me out of it as well. All right, so that's a little bit about how you get into functions and how you get out of functions, and we did talk about the standard viewing options. Okay, so again, this is the part that we want to draw. Again, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot to it, so let's kind of get back over here to our initial file. Okay, a couple of other things that I want to touch on real quick. This toolbar here will always be here. This is how you can get yourself in and out of selection mode. Really, there's it's not necessary to toggle between selection mode or toggle in and out of selection mode other than changing the color, layer, or line style, because any function that you get into that requires selection, it will put you in selection mode automatically. So just keep that in mind. Now, the first shape that I want to draw here is going to be a rectangle. So we're going to go to the rectangle function. You'll notice that we have a couple of new rectangle options here as well. Not going to work on, or we're not going to use them for this particular example, but definitely useful. Our first shape that we're going to start out with is going to be a 6 length by 3. Now, there's something I want to talk about here before we go any further, because I know new users or even existing users, when I'm in this data entry window here, you can see as I make adjustments to my size of the rectangle, you can see it updates. If I come in and adjust my reference point, you'll see that it updates. If I change my reference point location or base point location, you'll see that it updates, okay? If I move my mouse into the CAD window, then that shape is going to come with my mouse, okay? So now I'm in like a sketch mode. Now initially, you can see as I drag my mouse around, none of these data entry values change, okay? Once I left click on the drawing screen, all of a sudden the orange goes to blue, so the preview goes to a different preview, okay? And if I move my mouse away, it's still drawing with it, okay? So this is just a preview of the location of the rectangle that I'm drawing. Now, if I come back into the data entry and I adjust my location, you'll see how the shape comes along with it, okay? So I just wanted to take a moment to go through that. Again, this is going to be a 6 by 3. Now, as far as its reference location, you can pick from these different locations. In this case, it's going to be on center, okay? Now, I do want to talk about a new feature that we have here with rectangles. If I come in here and I say 45-degree angle, I can put that rectangle on a 45-degree angle or any angle that I may want. Okay, so that's a new little feature there. If we want to come in and adjust our corner types, we can, but in this case, this is going to be sharp corners, and we're going to say OK. All right, so that gives us our first piece of geometry. All right, so that's our rectangle. This gnomon in the center here, actually, hold on. I wanted to turn that on. Let me turn display, show axis, apply. Okay. I found that, the more that I've used Bobcat, I tend not to use the axis display, but it's a preference, and I'm constantly turning it on and off based on what I'm doing. Okay, so we get our rectangle here. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to add some radiuses here. We want to add a radius here, right? If we come back to our design and go to a top view here, you can see we have this rectangle that comes here, and there's a radius in the corner, okay? So if we come back to here, I'm going to hit, if you guys want to undo what you've done, you can always hit Control-Z, and that will undo it, right? If we go back to rectangle, you could do a 6 by 3 here, right? And then you could also say the radius amount, 1.5, and that would give us this shape. And again, we could come in and adjust what size that shape is. Okay, so you have the ability to do that. But in this particular example, what I want to start with is a base piece of geometry, and then I want to add to it. Okay, so we have our rectangle here. Now I want to add some radiuses in the corner. And just so you know, guys, at any time, if you have any questions, John, Terry, right, Dan, or anybody that's in the meeting, just go ahead and fire away. That's what I'm here for. Every question is a good question. Okay, so we drew our rectangle. We could draw it with the radiuses in the corner, but I want to add to this shape. So we started out with a rectangle. Now we're going to come over to the arc menu, and there's a lot of different arc options that we have. There's some new ones that we've added in the recent versions. Okay, the one I want to use here is arc 2 points. Okay, and I'm going to go from here. Okay, I'm just going to move my mouse. Actually, let me slow down. Okay, so we're going to go to arc from 2 points. All right, so I'm looking for 2-point locations. Now, one of the things you'll notice is as I move my mouse around, okay, you see these leader lines that are happening. This has to do with the XY tracking. This is a new function that's been added in the last recent versions. Okay, so that's the first thing, is you'll see the XY tracking. The other thing you can do is if you move over any entity, the snap points for that entity will appear. Okay, so no more shift clicking in order to get the snap points. If you want to snap to this corner here, you can just hover over the entity. The snap points will come up. Then you can highlight one of the snap points to pick it. And then you can drag your mouse down, hover over another entity, highlight the snap point to pick it, and now we've drawn this radius. Okay, now at this point, if we want to adjust the radius, we can still come back into the MDI and be able to make some changes. Okay, in our case, we don't want to do that, so we're going to leave this as is, but you do have the ability to adjust your MDI after you've sketched some of your geometry. So let's say OK on this one. That gives us one over there. Okay, now I have the ability to come in here and draw the second one, and you might choose to do it that way. Or you may decide that you want to use a mirror function. Okay, so if you're new to Bobcat and you're looking for an editing function, it's going to be found under the Utilities menu where all the editing functions are. So if you're looking to trim or break or rotate or anything like that, that will be found under the Utilities menu. Okay? All right. So we drew a rectangle and we drew 2 circles. Now what we want to do is trim away this inside geometry. Okay? But before I do that, I do want to take a moment and talk about the snap points and where the snap points will be located. So I'm going to right-click on my screen anywhere. I'm going to go to the selection mask. Okay, in here there's different there's ways for you to, the selection mask allows you to minimize different or control what geometry you're selecting or not. So you have the ability to turn the selection mask on or off. You'll notice that mine I keep on the bottom of the screen here. I find this very useful. But you'll also see that the snap points are here, and this is how you can turn on and off which snap points will be displayed when you hover over geometry. Okay. Tony had a question. Will we be covering creating geometry on different planes, like holes and slots on different planes? That'd be great. Yeah, definitely. Probably not in this series right now, this first three, but we'll definitely get into topics about the user coordinate system and how to use them. Okay. All right. So we have our two circles here. We have our rectangle. Now we want to trim one away from the other. How do we do that? All right. We're going to go to the utilities menu because this is where all your editing is done. You have a lot of options here: quick trim, trim 1, trim 2, trim strings. There's a lot of different options. Quick trim is probably the most popular, and it allows you to highlight an entity. Okay, so any entity, click on it, it goes away. Click on it, it goes away. Click on it, it goes away. All right, so this is a really simple way for you to go ahead and just click on what you want to delete. Now, if you're dealing with more complex geometry, let's undo, 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 right? So if you're dealing with more complex geometry, you may not want to click on each individual entity. And that's where the 2D Booleans come in really helpful. So we can go to create 2D, okay? We're going to do 2D Boolean. We're going to say add these two shapes together. Now I'm going to do a chain selection, just like any Windows product. When you're selecting multiple, you'll use Shift. So I'm going to hold Shift, left click on this shape. You can see that one's highlighted. Then I'm going to go, this is my geometry selection manager. So I know entities in this group will be added to entities from this group. To switch which group I'm working with, I just left click in the window of the working group that I want to be in. From here, I'm going to select this one. I'm going to select this one, and then I get a preview. If that's what I want, I'm going to say OK. All right, David had a question. Why did the left circle delete at 90 degrees and the right circle delete at 180? That has to do with the clock of the circle and the intersection, right? So when you have a full circle here, the start and end point is at 3 o'clock. Right, so there is an end point here, and then the arc sweeps this way. So that's why this was one section deleted, but when we went to this section here, this was all one swinging arc. Okay, so it has to do with circles and where the 0 is on that circle. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so we have our first Boolean shape here. 2D Boolean works like 3D Booleans. You can cut one shape away from another. That's our first piece of geometry. Now, in the past, when I've done, because I have done a webinar on this this part file here in version 29, so it was a few versions ago, what I did is I created some construction geometry. So I went to line, I snapped a line from here to here, spacebar to lock it in. Then I went over to this section here and I drew a line from here to here, spacebar to lock it in. So I use these lines as construction geometry. Then what I did is I came in and I figured out, what size, what size rectangle I wanted to make, what the radius size was, and then where it was located. And I was able to snap on this line and draw that right there. Okay, so you definitely can create construction geometry. You can draw lines of your own and use those in order to center or orientate your geometry. Another way you could do this too is just to use the reference point. And, it just depends on how much information you have, right? So I could say orientate this from the left. Maybe this is 1.5 inches away, or whatever the value might be. It might be 1.25 inches. Okay. From there, I can type in what my dimension is, right? I can add my fillet. So if you have a reference off the geometry itself, as far as a dimension from a print, you can type that information in. If you don't and you just want to center things up, you can also use construction geometry or draw geometry to aid in your design. Okay. Another thing as well is if the part is symmetrical, if it's the same on both sides, draw it on one side, you can mirror it to another. So let's go to Utilities. We'll go to Mirror. We'll select our profile. Again, this is a chain, so we'll Shift, left click. You can change what what you want to mirror it around. In this case, it's the YZ. We can say make a copy, okay, and that way you can mirror shapes from one side to the other. All right. Now, I also want to talk about another topic that's come up in the past, which this one is under line continuous. Okay, so we're going to do line continuous here. What I'm going to do is hover over this arc. I'm going to pick up this point here. I'm going to sketch this line up to some value. Okay, I want to look at my data entry here. My data entry allows me to adjust what the length of that line is, whether it's 2 inches, 1 inch, whatever the case is. And then I can also adjust what angle it's at, so maybe it's supposed to be at 120, okay? Or maybe it's supposed to be at 135. So you can use line continuous. You can sketch it out, then you can update it. The other thing you'll notice is with this construction geometry, I know this is going to be a perpendicular line. This is collinear in that direction. So I can kind of sketch this up to a spot that I might want it. If I want it to be tangent to this circle, I can hover over that circle, and then I can sketch this continuous line tangent to that circle. Again, I'm going to escape to get out of the function, and it's just a kind of a new way that the line continuous works. Again, if we were in here and we wanted to do a line that started at this position and it went out, some value, again, we could sketch it out, or we could just type in what that value would be. If it's at no angle, then we can leave it at 0. If we need to kick it up at an angle, it's very easy to do that. And again, you have your construction geometry, which allows you to figure out your parallel or perpendicular. And if you hover over a radius, then it will show you that tangency as well. Okay, so just wanted to touch on that real quick. All right, so let me escape out of that. So we drew a rectangle, we added some fillets. We drew another rectangle, and we mirrored it, okay? So the next thing that I want to talk about has to do with, line parallel and offsets. Now, I'm not using a parallel line here, but a lot of times when you're drawing based off of prints, you're going to have a base known value, like from this line this way or from this line that way, some distance. And line parallel is a great way in order to get those values. We can just come down to line parallel, okay? We can click on the line. If we move our mouse one direction, it goes one way. If we move our mouse to the other side of the line, it will go the other way. So this is a very easy way in order to make adjustments to your geometry. Now you will notice that there's a distance here, and you can enter a distance. You will notice there's a side only, so this puts you in a parallel line kind of as a sketch. This is great for when you're setting up boundaries and things like that. And then there's also a free drag, so you can freely drag this wherever you may want. Okay, so that's just a quick touch on line parallel. The other thing I want to get into is offset, right? Offsets are also very common. Okay, for us, we're going to go to offset here. All right, now again, we're going to be utilizing this geometry selection manager. And what I mean by that is we don't right click OK anything. What we'll do is we'll select our geometry, and that geometry will be listed in this window here. Okay, so you'll notice that I can select only chains. I'd probably do a single entity, but it's looking for chains here. It's going to list these chains in the selection manager. The other thing you'll notice is you can change the direction in which it's selected. Okay, so instead of doing these separately, I can select them all at one time, and then I can adjust what direction they're going by inverting its selection direction. Okay, so that's a little bit about the offset function. Let me undo that. On these in the center here, we're going to just do offset. I'm going to select this one and this one. I want to offset it out 1/4 inch. That looks good. Okay, now if I want to switch which direction, I can just go left or right. Okay, if I want to add multiple offsets, I could add multiple offsets. Okay, we just want one here. That looks good. All right, I'm going to do the same thing on the outside. Again, I'm selecting a chain, so I'll shift, left click on the profile. We can see that's going to go outside. All right, so again, offsets are line parallel, rectangle, arc 2 points, line parallel, offsets. These are things you guys will use every day in your design or programming process. Okay, all right. So we've generated some offsets. The next thing, if we go back to our part here, you can see, we have an offset for this inside and outside, right? There's some fillets here. We'll get into drawing those a little later. Right now, we're dealing with this bolt pattern here that we have on the outside and how we go about creating that bolt pattern, okay? So we'll come back in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw some circles. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this, right? As usual. So we're going to go to arc. We're going to say arc center. Okay. We'll come down and we'll set the radius that we want to draw. And what we can do is move over our geometry and we can pick locations. Maybe there's one there. Now there's one here. There's one here. One there. Okay, so we can just go through and pick up these snap points pretty quickly and draw each one of these. Okay, that's not the worst scenario. Escape to get out of it. It's not the worst scenario, but not as fast as it could be. And if you're drawing a lot of bolt patterns, you may be looking for a quicker way. So let's take a look at doing this differently. So I'm going to Control Z to undo all those. And what I want to do is put a point at the endpoints and midpoints of our entities, right? So how do we do that? We're going to go to the point menu. We're going to go to points from entities, okay? We're going to select the geometry we want to work with. So I'm going to chain select this here, okay? And then we can toggle on the different point from options, right? So we want endpoints, we want midpoints, but we don't want the arc centers. Okay, so that gives us the endpoints and the midpoints just like that. Once we have them selected and the preview is what we want, we're going to choose OK. Now that we have those points selected, what we want to do is come back and snap radiuses to them. Okay, so we're going to go to the arc. We're going to use the same option. Okay, this time we're going to choose center selection mode, single pick coordinates or multi-picking. We're going to choose multi-picking. We can window pick through all of these and snap the arcs right on them. We can choose OK. All right, we want to use a smaller size on the inside, so we're going to do the same thing again. Window pick, and that puts them on there. Okay, all right. So now what we want to do is come back and trim these up. If we look at this, we want to trim this up. And like I talked about before, you can come in here under quick trim and you can click these and delete it. Okay, but that's going to be more work than necessary. And it's also the potential that you might miss a little piece of geometry and kind of chase that down. Let me see here. I have a couple of splines that I wanted to be continuous. How do I join them into one spline? I'll come back to that here in a minute, Michael. All right, so we have all our points here. We have all our circles. Now we want to combine these two shapes. Okay, so again, we're going to use 2D Boolean. So we'll go to Create 2D. We're going to do 2D Boolean. This is going to be an add. All right, I'm going to shift, left click on our profile here. And then to select these arcs, I'm just going to do a window pick. There is a pick and match by radius option, which is not too bad, but you can also just window pick by dragging a window in there. Oh, I put them all in the wrong spot. Now I could go through and delete them one by one. That's one of the advantages of working with the geometry selection manager, because everything's listed in there. So if you make a mistake, you can select it and delete it. Normally, I would probably just clear the whole selection because it would be faster. In some cases, it may not be. So again, a neat little feature there. Let me get into box number 2 here. Now let me add all of my radiuses on the top and bottom. Okay, looks good. We're going to go ahead and choose OK. And you can see how we combined the radiuses with this outside profile. Okay. So the next thing that we're looking at doing here is we're looking at adding fillets to this. So, but while we're doing that, let's let's see what Mike's talking about here with multiple splines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do points again, points from entities. I'm going to do endpoints, and I'm going to select this chain. Then I'm going to do midpoints, and that will give me a bunch of point locations. I'm going to say OK and cancel. Now, before I did this, I did create a new layer. I'm going to turn off the original layer. This gives me a bunch of point locations. From here, I'm going to go to spline. I'm going to say spline fit. We have a multi-picking option here. I'm going to try window picking it all. And, you know, it's getting me what I'm getting there. I'm going to go back to spline interpolated or one of these other spline options. I don't know that just window picking it is going to work, right? So let me clear this. You probably need to do these in an order. You know, the thing is when it comes to splines, I don't know of a way to combine the splines as one shape, okay? Some systems use what's called polylines, and polylines is a way of grouping geometry together via nodes, and then you can pull and tug on them. Bobcat does not support polylines. We can import them, but we don't create polylines, and there is no grouping function either. But you could take your points and be able to draw a spline through it. I'm picking these one at a time to make sure that they're going in the order that I want them to. And then we'll end up here. Yeah, it won't let me, it doesn't look like it'll let me use the same start and end point. Again, with the preview option here, you can come through and adjust some of this stuff. But I'm not sure of a way to combine multiple splines into one. Mike, I think you're looking for polylines, which we actually don't. We support importing them, but we don't actually draw them within our system. Let's delete. Okay, go back to here. All right, so yeah, no problem. Okay, so being mindful with our time, we spent about 38 minutes so far, but again, we want to keep moving forward with our wireframe design. So we combined our outside shapes. Our next thing that we want to do is we want to add some fillets, okay? So we can go to Create 2D again, and we can choose Fillet. There are a couple of options. You have between two entities, you have single corner, click, and you have chains. Between two entities, you would set what the radius size you want, and then you would pick two entities, and then you could draw your radius between them. You can see how that works. For this shape, it would require a few clicks to get around, so I'm going to Control Z to undo that. Now you can use single corner click, and this would allow you to just pick on any corner of your geometry, okay? All you do is hover over it, and then it will preview it, and that will let you add your fillets, okay? So that's another way to do it. With geometry like this, I would recommend the chain selection, okay? So if we do chains here, we can shift and left click on this profile, okay? And now you can see it's going to fillet them all at one time. But what I like about this is you can really, adjust what your value is and be able to see the effect that it has on it, so you can dial in that design. Generally you want your inside corners to be greater than the radius of whatever tool you plan on cutting this. So cutting this with. So, as a general rule of thumb, you want the radius that the tool is trying to sweep for inside corners like that to be greater than the radius of your cutter, so it doesn't, your cutter doesn't stall and get chatter and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to go ahead and update this, and from here we're going to choose OK and then cancel, and that gives us our basic wireframe design for this particular project. Okay, so I'm going to pause for just a moment. If there's any questions about the workflow or topics that I've covered so far, go ahead and fire away. Otherwise, we're going to use the last 20 minutes to get into the 3D design and being able to use the CAD History Tree. All right, so I'll pause for a moment, take a sip of my water. If you have any questions, fire away. Otherwise, we'll move on in just a moment. All right, looks like we're good. Time for a commercial break. Hey, by the way, guys, if you are interested in online training, in-house training, training seminars, Bobcat has lots of resources for you regardless of your budget or experience level. If you have an interest in online training or any of the training options that we have, call 877-333-4903. The promo code for today, the promo code is The Wiz. You have to call in. I was in the webinar and I got the promo code The Wiz. It's kind of a funny story because I've grown a longer beard over the last couple of years, and some people call me the Wizard. So the promo code for today is going to be The Wiz. It doesn't just apply to training products like online training, in-house training, training seminars. You can use the Wiz promo for support if you need to update your support, add-ons if you want to add add-ons, going from Mill Standard to Mill Pro, Mill Premium to Multi-Axis, Mill Turn, Machine Simulation, NC Edit Pro. The Wiz promo code will be in effect for now till the end of the week, so you can use it during that time period, and you do get a special discount. You'll have to speak with your account manager for all the details. Okay, now, with that done, let's take a look at our 3D design. Now, for me, anytime I start getting into 3D, I like to rotate the part. I like to look at different views of it, and it makes it really, help see the 3D side of things. So again, that's just pressing your center mouse wheel and choosing to rotate with your mouse, okay? So that's how we get into our rotation. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is this layer menu over here. I'm using the After Dark. I'm using the After Dark user profile. Depending on which profile you're using will determine where your layer menu is. Now, layers are like pieces of paper, and you can use them in order to turn on or off different parts of your design. Okay, so you can see right now, if I turn off the CAD layer by clicking on the eyeball, all the sketches go away. All right. If you're a SolidWorks user or an Inventor user, a lot of times when you design in 3D, the sketches get absorbed into the design feature. Okay. In BobCAD, your wireframe and your solids, they're separate entity types. They can live on the same layer, but I generally like to have one layer for the wireframe and then another layer for the solid. Okay. Another thing that I want to touch on real quick, if you don't like utilizing the layers and creating a lot of layers, the other thing you can use is blank and unblank. Blank, you can window pick your geometry, choose OK. It's all hidden. It's just hidden in the background. And then if you want to bring it back up, you just click this little arrow down and you can choose unblank, window pick what you want to unblank and choose OK, and then it will come back up. All right. So that's how you can use blank and unblank as another method in order to control the visibility of your wireframe. Now, the next thing that I want to look at here is extrusion. Okay, so let's go into the solid menu. In the solid menu, you have primitives. These are solid bodies, cones, cylinders, torus, spheres, those types of objects. So you can create designs with those. You could draw a rectangle, you could draw out a cylinder, you could draw out a cone. You have the ability to pull and tug on these shapes, make them bigger, make them smaller. If you're dealing with geometry that uses that form, designing with solids is a great way to go. All right. The other option, which is, I think, more typical in a lot of scenarios, is you draw sketches first, like what we've done here today, and then you'll take those sketches and you'll turn them into solids. Okay. And the process that you do for that is with extrusion. Okay. So you have extrude curve, you had extrude surface. This imprint function is great for creating soft jaws and things like that, a variety of different things. You have extrude cut and you have extrude boss. And really extrude cut and extrude boss are going to be the most common ones that you use. There are cases where you'll use extrude curve as well. If you're using extrude curve, there's some, if you're using extrude boss or extrude cut, that's going to add to or cut away from all of the solids on the screen, anything that's there, whether it's visible or not. If you use extrude curve, you can add a solid, and then you can use a Boolean process to cut it away. So let's take a look. I'm going to do extrude curve, and I'm going to chain select this profile. Again, I can pull this up or I can pull it down, whichever direction that I want. I'm going to choose OK, and now we have a solid here. Okay, if we look in our CAD history tree, you can see there's a single solid right now. Okay, if I come back in here and I do extrude curve again, I can select another profile. Now, one of the things you'll notice is as I try to select over this face, it's blocking me from selecting that wireframe, right? I can't seem to select it, right? See how it selected the face there? Okay. So what you're going to want to do is left click first in the drawing screen. Then you're going to want to hit S on your keyboard to toggle the shading off. Now you'll be able to come in and select that wireframe. And I'm going to select this one and this one here. Okay. And I'm going to pull this one up here. Okay. And I'm going to pull this one down here. Okay. And I'll choose OK. So now I'll left click back into the drawing space and I'll hit S on my keyboard. So now we can see we have these two different bodies that are created at this point. All right. Now, if we look in the tree, you can see we have one solid, two solid, and then three solid, right? So these are three separate bodies. If I go to selection, here, let me highlight over here. If I go to selection, you can see I can select them differently. So they're independently. They're all separate entities at this point, okay? So when you use extrude curve will create separate bodies or separate solid models, okay? Now, if you want to combine them afterwards, you can use a Boolean process, similar to what we did with 2D Booleans with wireframe, but now we're in 3D. So we could do, let's say, a subtract, right? So I could say subtract, keep this shape, subtract that one. I can show a preview. I can say OK. And now you can see we cut one shape away from another. I'm going to cancel. We'll come up into our tree here. You can see we have one solid here, and then we have another solid. Okay, so with the Boolean function, we were able to combine the two together, and you could add or subtract. That's when using extrude curve. Extrude curve will create a separate body, and then in order to add it or subtract it from another body, you use a Boolean process. Okay, now with that said, there's some other things that we have going on here. This is our CAD history tree. The CAD history tree is going to keep track of all of your design steps for solids. Any editing of solids or moving of solids will all be kept track here. This is a step-by-step process. There are some wireframe functions like the 2D Boolean will stay in the CAD history tree. If you're using a shape library, there'll be a history of that in the CAD history tree as well. But for the most part, this is to keep track of the editing and creation of your solids. Now, there's some options in here where you can rebuild your tree, okay? You can delete a selected item, so I could delete an item, okay? You also have the ability to optimize a tree. Optimize is if you have a bunch of if you have a bunch of translates or what have you, you can optimize your tree, consolidating different translations that you made. The other one that you have here too is you have delete history tree. And the delete history tree will remove all the steps that you use to create your design. Okay, so let me come in here and delete these shapes because I actually don't want them. It looks like I messed something up here, so let me just undo a bit and we'll get back to here. Again, just undoing was using Control-Z. Okay, so you can build up a tree, and probably the number one issue I see with a lot of new users is they don't understand that there's a history of what's happening, and the history affects things before and after, or can, especially when you start swapping out and changing your design around. You do have the ability now to delete the entire history tree. It doesn't delete your model, but it will delete the steps that you took to get your model, okay? All right, so let's keep going here. We got about 10 minutes left in the given time. So again, extrude curve. If we choose extrude curve, we chain select our profile. This is going to generate a solid, right? And you can make it go up, you can make it go down. Okay, that's extrude curve. Once you've extruded this, if I hit S on my keyboard, I can toggle the shading off, and then I could do another extrude curve, right? So I could grab another shape. All right, I can pull this one down to whatever the depth might be, type in what the value is, and say OK. All right, but at this point, because I just used extrude curve, these are going to be two separate bodies. See, this is one body, this is a body. These are, 1, 2, 3 separate bodies. All right, now let's undo that. Control Z, Control Z. Now let's look at using extrude boss. So I'm going to do extrude boss. Extrude boss will add to your design. So again, we'll select this shape here. I'm going to tell it to go down, let's say 1/2 inch. Okay, that gives me the first one. We'll say OK. Again, I want to select this outside shape here and this outside shape for the next one. If I move my mouse over this surface, you can see how it's blocking it, right? I'm not able to select the wireframe. So we're going to left click in the CAD screen, hit shift on the keyboard. Hit S on the keyboard. Then we're going to hold shift. We'll left click on this profile, left click on that profile. That will chain it around. We're going to do, let's say 2 inches down on this one. We're going to say OK, and then cancel on the extrude boss, right? So now what's different about the extrude boss here, we can see one extrude boss there, we can see one extrude boss there, but when it comes to the solids, we only have one solid. So the extrude boss is combining the shapes as we go. Extrude curves is generating separate bodies that you would then combine later, okay? Now, because you have a CAD history tree, at any time, if you want to go in and make changes to, this standoff here, maybe I wanted it to be greater than that value, I do have the ability to come back and edit that, and I could make this, larger. And then what it will do is update the design for that change. Okay, so you can go in here once you get a extrude or a list of features set up here. You go back and you can start making changes, suppressing things, turning things on or off. Okay, so that's extrude boss. Now, if I come in and I use extrude cut, okay, this is going to, instead of adding to the model, it's going to cut away from it. So I can select this inside shape and this inside shape. Again, I can pull this all the way through. We can say OK, and then now you can see how that one is cut all the way through to the bottom. Extrude boss adds to the design, extrude cut cuts away from it. What is the disadvantage of having multiple bodies? I don't know that it's necessarily a disadvantage. It's just understanding that. So understanding that if you use extrude cut, it will cut through any bodies that are there. Okay. If you use extrude curve, in order for it to cut away from another body, you would have to select it and use a Boolean process. So I think more so, once you get used to using extrude cut and extrude boss, there'll be times where you want to add a detail to your model, but you don't want it to cut away from other details in your model. And that's where you'll use extrude, curve, and then Booleans in order to control that process. So hopefully that answered that question for you. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantage of having multiple bodies is it gives you more control over the Boolean process. Disadvantage of, and it's not really about multiple bodies, it's advantage of extrude curve and advantage of extrude boss or extrude cut. Tom says, what's the advantage of deleting your CAD history tree? Does it make your Bobcat file smaller? Yes, it does, Tom. If you bring in an assembly, an assembly model and you got to rotate it 3 or 4 times, let's say it's a 20 meg file. You rotate it 3 or 4 times to get it into position. Bobcat's keeping a history of that. So your file is getting bigger and bigger exponentially as you continue to move that geometry around. Okay. By deleting the history tree, you delete those instances and thereby reducing the size of the file, sometimes as much as 70%. It depends on the geometry that you're working on. Dan's got a question here. He says, Al. Hi, Dan. What else you got? All right, let me while you formulate that, I'm going to keep going here. Okay, so we did our extrude boss for the first shape. We did our extrude cut for the second shape. Or we did extrude boss, extrude cut. Okay, now what we want to do, we want to get this this shoulder here, right? But actually, you can see I forgot the holes. The holes in this cut all the way through as well. So, you know, what should I generate another extrude cut? Well, you know, my recommendation is trying to minimize the number of features that are in your tree instead of creating excess features. Hey, no problem, Dan. Instead of creating excess features. So what we're going to do is go to extrude cut. We're going to reselect, you know, and then now I'm just going to add these circles here. And like I said, there is a select by radius size option. They moved it on the interface a little bit, so I tend to find myself just picking the radiuses by hand. All right, so that you can see how I could add to that design later. Okay, I want to come in here and I want to cut this shoulder, right? So again, we're going to do a similar process. For me, when I'm cutting shoulders like this, where I have an inside shape and an outside shape, I'm going to choose the extrude cut. I'll select the inside shape first, okay? Then I'll select the outside shape. All right, and then I'll come in and tell it, you know, how much I want it to go down, and then we'll say, okay. All right, so if you're gonna do an extrude cut where there's an inside shape and an outside profile, select the inside shape first, then select the outside profile. All right, so this gives us, you know, pretty close here. If you look at this design, we can see there's still a radius that needs to go on the inside, and there's a radius that needs to go on the outside, right? So let's come back into here. I'm going to turn the wireframe geometry off just to make it a little easier to see, and then I'm going to add, yeah, Dale, my audio's on, so I would check your audio system here. All right, again, the last thing we want to do is we want to add these fillets. So we're going to choose fillet here. We're going to go ahead and pick one of these edges, okay? We can see show preview. We'll get a preview of that radius. We can hide preview, turn it off. We can increase this size here. We type in the new size that we want. We can say to the current geometry selection, or we can say to all the geometry. And then again, we can see that preview. Okay, if we want to add more edges, we can add this edge as well. We can say show preview, and then we can see it. You know, and let's say the radius is too big to fit. Let's make this 1.5, all geometry, show preview. If the radius can't fit, what will happen is the preview won't show the model. So it shows that that's how it shows that it fails. Okay, so if we say hide preview, you can see it comes back. If we reduce the size of it, and show the preview again, then we're going to see the preview. You know, you shouldn't have any problems generating fillets along simple shapes like this. The only thing that can be problematic sometimes is when you're dealing with fillets, and fillets can be complicated. But if your fillet is extending past the edge of a model or up into another object, sometimes that can be problematic, and you have to go at it at a little different workflow. Okay, so again, let's just up this up a little bit. Hide all geometry, show. Okay, so that's too big. Let's go 5. All geometry, show. Okay, so there we go. That gets us the biggest radius. We can probably go a little bit further, but that's fine. All right, we'll say okay to that one. Another thing too, if you guys are adding fillets to your design, I would recommend this be the last step that you take. I wouldn't do this earlier in the process. I would do this at the end of the process, your detail work. Okay, so we can add one there, hide the preview. We can add one here, show the preview. Okay, looks good. We'll say okay and cancel. All right, there we go. From wireframe to solids, that's today's webinar. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you want to pick up additional parts of the conversation, join the After Dark Facebook group. We post live videos, or I host live videos in the Facebook group Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually more often than that, on the lunch hour. Free to join. Just go to Facebook, search Bobcat After Dark. Look forward to seeing you in that group. My expectation is as we ramp up these webinars, there'll be a lot of scuttlebutt and side conversation that shows up in the groups. Again, the promo code for attending, your reward for attending today's webinar, promo code is The Wiz. Special offer on add-on support training. Call 877-333-4903. Promo code The Wiz. Call with the promo code The Wiz, and you're going to get a whiz of a deal. Actually, I don't know what it is, but it depends on the department, but definitely give them a call. Thank you so much for showing up here today, Dan. Gary, thanks for attending. Tony, happy to see you here. David, absolutely. Next week, same time, same place. So you guys can get in here same time every Wednesday for the next 2 Wednesdays. We'll be covering this. Is this available on After Dark? No, but I will post it on YouTube here. Felix had a question. These are just the original file. I opened this up first, and then I went through and created this one. So they're a little bit different, but basically the same workflow as what we covered there. Again, if you guys have registered for this webinar, we will email you off a link to it here shortly. Again, thank you for your time. Promo code's The Wiz. And I'll tell you what, if you call in with The Wiz and you order something today, which helps us and helps you, I got a t-shirt for somebody, okay? It's not from Bobcat, it's from somebody else. It's a large, it's a really good t-shirt, okay? So if you call in, yeah, I'll do my best to call you here in just a little bit. If you call in and order something today with the Wiz promo code, I got a t-shirt for you. One of you anyways. I only got one t-shirt. So again, I appreciate your time. Hope you guys had a great day. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. I appreciate each and every one of you spending some time with me here today. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you so much.